welcome to Aljazeera, live from our headquarters in Doha with me, Elizabeth Puranam. Also ahead, Kenya's opposition leader withdraws from the presidential election rerun. Raila Odinga says the election commission won't give him a fair chance. A major cholera immunization campaign begins in Bangladesh as Rohingya Muslims continue to flee Myanmar. And California assesses the damage as wildfires spread through the U.S. state for a third day. Catalonia's leader has stepped back from declaring independence, instead calling for talks to resolve Spain's worst political crisis in decades. Carles Puigdemont did sign a symbolic declaration, but it's unclear if that has any legal status. Jonah Hull reports from Barcelona.
He arrived at a parliament building bristling with expectation. A heavy police presence hinted at the weighty announcement to come. But Carles Puigdemont, president of Catalonia's regional government, stopped short of a full declaration of independence.
El mandat del poble que Catalunya esdevingui.
As president, it's my responsibility to declare that Catalonia should become an independent state in the shape of a republic.
Should become, the words greeted with rousing applause in the chamber before the independent state part was put on hold.
We asked the Parliament to suspend any effects of the Declaration of Independence so that we can have dialogue and so that we can find the necessary solution. We need to lower tensions and show our will and commitment to meet the demands of the Catalan people.
The reaction in Madrid came swiftly.
El discurso que ha hecho hoy el presidente de la Generalitat.
The speech that the Catalan president has made today is a speech by a person who doesn't know where he is, where he's going, or with whom he wants to go. The government cannot accept that the Catalan referendum be validated because it's been suspended by the Constitutional Court.
Having consistently refused to talk, one centrist politician suggested that time may have come for the government to compromise.
I think the better way they can solve the problem is with a negotiation, some kind, as I said, of mediation.
A disappointment perhaps to some staunch secessionists who'd hoped tonight would be their night, but sweet relief to many who'd feared the consequences of an outright declaration of independence after threats from Madrid and the flight of top companies from Catalonia since the referendum on October the 1st. In Barcelona, the faithful who gathered to watch the speech on big screens left deflated, but accepted that all was not lost.
I'm happy that he's given a lapse of time in order for people to think.
We really don't understand what's the situation, we can say. I mean, what the president just said.
So, a signed declaration, but independence deferred. Puigdemont's speech stipulated no timeline for talks with Madrid. The drama of Catalonia's independence that has played out in this parliament building for nearly 100 years isn't over yet. Jonah Hull, Aljazeera, Barcelona.
Lawrence Lee has more from Madrid on the Spanish government's response.
The Catalan government thought that by extending the hand of friendship to Spain, as they would have put it, they might have got the Spanish government to reply in kind by agreeing to open negotiations. It looks like that was a completely vain hope. The response from the Spanish government already tonight here has been acid and immediate. They have said, what on earth are the Catalans doing announcing independence and yet immediately suspending it? They say it has no legal basis. A popular party, the ruling party, spokesman described it to me as a joke and a farce. He said there was absolutely no grounds on which they could negotiate at all. Then the Deputy Prime Minister spoke and she said that there would be an emergency cabinet meeting on Wednesday morning during which the Spanish government response would be clarified, and the Prime Minister has been meeting people from all the opposition parties to discuss a sort of pan-Spanish parliamentary response to what the Catalans have said. Now clearly the Catalans hope that by acting in this way they will have to some extent appeased the European Union, and that they hope perhaps the European Union will now put some pressure on Spain and say, well, look, the Catalans have done this, now you must come to the table and negotiate in the same way. But as it is at the moment, there is no sign whatsoever that the Spanish government wants to do anything of the sort.
To other news now, and there's been another twist in Kenya's presidential election. with opposition leader Raila Odinga withdrawing from the vote rerun. But the president says the poll will still go ahead in just over 2 weeks. Odinga has accused the Electoral Commission of failing to make the changes necessary for a more credible outcome. Catherine Soy reports from Nairobi.
All indications are that the election scheduled for 26th of October will be worse than the previous one.
Unprecedented times in Kenya. The only other candidate expected to be on the ballot paper for the election rerun later in the month has pulled out. Raila Odinga and his NASA opposition coalition says they will not participate in a poll they feel is predetermined, one where the same individuals and companies that oversaw the last election are still in place.
Shall not allow anything to dampen our morale. We won the battle for multi-party democracy. We won the battle for a new constitution. We are going to win the battle for a free and fair election. After deliberating on our position in respect of the upcoming election, considering the interests of the people of Kenya, the region and the world at large, we believe that all will be best served by NASA vacating its presidential candidature in the election scheduled for 26th October this 2017.
The opposition supporters have been staging weekly demonstrations against the Electoral Commission and calling for electoral reforms. Commission officials say some of the opposition demands are unreasonable and there is simply no time to implement them. The political situation in the country is worrying many.
I'm not worried about violence. I think Kenyans have moved on. I have a strong feeling that Kenyans not really moved on, but they've accepted that peace is paramount.
There's high likelihood of having violence in the sense that let's call it about political instability or a political conflict, in the sense that if a war is being sown in, people will not accept that. And already there's trauma everywhere, there's destruction everywhere.
Kenya is in uncharted territory, politically and constitutionally. The law is unclear on what happens in a situation like this. The Constitution does not envision an eventuality where no re-election is held within a 60-day legal timeline, which expires at the end of the month. Lawyers say if no election is held by the deadline, there will be a constitutional crisis. President Uhuru Kenyatta has been busy campaigning. He says he's ready for an election with or without Raila Odinga. Should he be declared the winner and endorsed anyway, then the legitimacy of his presidency will inevitably be questioned. Many Kenyans are fearful about what the political grandstanding between the two sides is doing to the country. Tensions are high, the economy is struggling, the country is very much in limbo. Catherine Soy, Aljazeera, Nairobi, Kenya.
Washington has come out in defense of its ambassador to Turkey after the Turkish president said his government no longer recognizes the diplomat. It is the latest move in the escalating dispute between the NATO allies, as Patty Culhane reports from Washington, D.C.
Another day of tough talk between the U.S. and its NATO ally, Turkey. Now, the U.S. says this all started when two Turks who work for the U.S. Embassy were arrested and a third one was questioned. In response, they said they were no longer going to issue visas out of Turkey for travel to America. Turkey responded with the exact same action. Now we're hearing from Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the Turkish president, trying to, it seems, find a way out of this, blaming the ambassador, not the Trump administration.
It is interesting that an ambassador in Ankara makes decisions and says he is doing so in the name of his government. If that's the case, we have nothing to talk about with the high-ranking officials in the United States. But if that's not the case, and the ambassador took this decision on his own, they shouldn't keep that ambassador in that position, even for a minute.
So did Ambassador John Bass go rogue? Well, not so much, according to the State Department.
This was coordinated with the State Department, it was coordinated with the White House, and coordinated with the NSC.
The goal of some officials.
Ambassador John Bass is not going to be a concern for Turkey much longer. He is moving. He's been nominated to the U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan. And at the State Department, senior officials say they did notify the Turkish officials that this was coming down the pipeline, still not doing anything to ease the tension between these two traditional allies that have had a frosty relationship as of late.
Turkish authorities have arrested 30 members of the armed forces over suspected links to the banned Gulenist movement. A state-run news agency says police issued warrants for 40 others in the Air Force, Navy and Army. Ankara says the movement, led by US-based cleric Fethullah Gulen, was behind last year's failed coup. Since then, authorities have arrested at least 50,000 people. The UN Special Envoy for Yemen is accusing the country's warring leaders of pushing for power and wealth instead of peace. Ismail Oud Sheikh Ahmed is proposing new talks to alleviate the deepening humanitarian crisis. Mike Hanna reports from the United Nations.
This is now the greatest humanitarian disaster in the world. That's according to figures presented to the UN Security Council, which indicate some 22 million people in Yemen require immediate assistance. There are now nearly 1 million cases of cholera, and more than 2,000 people have already died of the disease. Famine on an unprecedented scale is a real possibility.
It is the result of this crisis that has left some 15 million people lacking adequate access to clean drinking water, sanitation and hygiene, health services. 7 million people are faced with the threat of famine. And all of this is exacerbated by the largest single-year cholera outbreak ever recorded.
The UN Special Representative Ismail Oud Sheikh Ahmed insists that what he calls influential people are not interested in finding solutions, as they'll lose power in any settlement.
I request the Security Council to use all its political and economic power to exert pressure on all parties to commit to a path of peace. All the parties must come out of their past entrenched position and put an end to hostile rhetoric. Instead of fighting over Yemen, let's cooperate for the best interest of the country.
In the coming weeks, the Special Representative will convene a meeting in London of the UK, the US, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, which together with Oman make up what is referred to as the Quint, charged with renewing the long-dormant political process in Yemen. The problem, though, is that 2 of these states are part of the Saudi-led coalition and as such themselves parties to the conflict. Mike Hanna, Aljazeera, United Nations.
Now, one of the world's biggest cholera immunization campaigns is underway in Bangladesh amid fears of an epidemic. 900,000 doses of the vaccine have been prepared to protect local communities and Rohingya refugees who fled violence in Myanmar. Mohammed Jamjoon reports from a refugee camp in Cox's Bazar.
For these Rohingya refugees who've been exposed to so much violence and who still don't feel safe, this is an attempt to at least keep them healthy. A massive cholera vaccination campaign led by Bangladesh's Ministry of Health and supported by groups like the World Health Organization and UNICEF. The goal is to vaccinate 650,000 people during the first phase. Many in this makeshift camp are happy it's happening. Far more needs to be done.
The water is too far away. That's a problem, and people are suffering. There are just too many people here, and that's why it's so dirty. Everyone is getting sick.
More than 500,000 refugees have fled from Myanmar to Bangladesh in just 6 weeks. At the Shafiola Kata camp, the signs of overcrowding are everywhere.
Aid workers worry that extremely unhygienic conditions in camps like this one could make an already awful situation even worse, which in turn could lead to a full-blown health crisis.
Among the many causes of concern are thousands of diarrhea cases reported and treated just in the past week.
When you see like thousands of people are suffering from diarrhea, that actually gives you an indication that the water supply situation as well as the sanitation situation is not in good shape, and if we don't react, if we don't take the preventive measures, things may go really wrong.
Shortages of food, water, and shelter all indicate how dire things have become.
Recently, we have just talked with a number of people, and out of them, 90% have said that they are living on 1 meal per day. So the situation is really bad, but everybody down here, is working really hard to make the demands.
With very little clean water at their disposal, life, which is already hard, only gets harder. Especially in such severe heat. Gurabano made sure she and her children were vaccinated, but that has done little to lessen her worries.
There are very few toilets here. In a period of 3 to 5 days, it becomes full and unusable. It stinks a lot. There are too many people here. We can live without eating once or twice a day, but we can't live without being able to use the toilets.
Struggling to survive is nothing new for these refugees, and it's likely their struggle won't end anytime soon. Mohammed Jamjoom, Aljazeera, at the Shafiullah Kata refugee camp in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh.
Still ahead on the bulletin.
They are sending the absolute wrong message to the world and to the American people.
Environmentalists criticize the Trump administration for scrapping an Obama-era climate change law. And a new exhibition in Paris tries to capture the magic of one of France's most famous modern artists without ignoring his darker side.